The New York Mets have acquired outfielder Alexander Canario from the Chicago Cubs for cash considerations. And you're probably sitting here thinking to yourself, the Mets have a billion outfielders. What's the point of getting Alexander Canario? And who the heck is Alexander Canario? And I'll tell you right now. Right here on Mets Daily, I'm your host, Jake Brown, at Jake Brown Radio. Smash that thumbs up right now on YouTube. It helps the channel. We're over 1,200 subscribers. Subscribe to Mets Daily. Share it with your family and friends. We appreciate the support. Remember, it is a Tuesday, so tomorrow we're doing a mailbag. So the top 3 comments below, I will read on tomorrow's show and dedicate a segment to you, the viewers of Mets Daily. So I appreciate your support. And then Thursday, another weekly guest. I'm excited for this week's guest. We got another good one. So looking forward to that. I'll talk about that tomorrow. But welcome aboard. It is Tuesday, February 25th. Jose Siri homered today in spring training. Luis Angel Acuña scored a run and had some action. I'll get into him in a little bit. So some fun things happening in Mets land, and obviously the wins and losses. If you're losing sleep over spring training wins and losses, I'm concerned for your mental health. It was 60 degrees today in New Jersey. The weather was great. A beautiful weather week. Baseball's on the horizon, and we're ready to roll. And the Mets last night on Monday night acquired Alexander Canario from the Cubs, and he is an intriguing player. Let's go over who is Canario, and if you understand the headline reference, so what's the Canario, then you're a rap fan like me. A 24-year-old from the Dominican Republic, so the Mets adding another Dominican player, adding to the vibes and the aura going on in Mets land right now. He'll be 25 in May. The Mets placed Nick Madrigal in the 60-day IL, which tells you Nick Madrigal might be cooked for the year before he even got an at-bat to add Canario to the 40-man roster. Now, he has no options left. He would need to crack the opening day roster for the Mets. That's the intrigue here. It's a low-risk, high-upside potential, but also there isn't a spot at the current moment for him. But it is February 25th, and with how things have been changing and injuries have been happening, that could change at some point. The Mets could try to sneak him through waivers to make this work. It's very confusing with waivers and rosters and options, and it's a lot to get into, and you could do a whole book on that. I don't love the baseball process with it, but there is a way they can do it. It worked with Luis de los Santos. They put him through waivers. They got him back. It didn't work with Dylan Covey, who ended up going to the Atlanta Braves. But he does have no options, which is the intriguing part of this deal. You can't just throw him in AAA and say, oh, he'll be great. We'll call him out when we need him. That option right now is just not there. Now, he's never played the infield. He's only an outfielder. He's played mostly center and some right and some left. The metrics and the nerds and the stats don't love his defense, but he is intriguing offensively. This is a guy that didn't get a lot of chances for the Cubs. There just wasn't a spot for him. He was the headline prospect in the Chris Bryant trade, originally with the Giants, went to the Cubs in the Chris Bryant deal, and he was recently just DFA'd by the Cubs to make room for Justin Turner. This is a guy that only got 42 at-bats, but he did hit all right. He was 286, 2 homers, 8 RBIs in 21 games. He has pop. In 64 games, he had 18 homers in AAA, but that 2022 minor league season is where your eyes really open up when you think about this kid, is that over 3, single A, double A, triple A in 2022, over 3 minor league systems, 37 homers, 97 RBIs. He's got a decent OBP. His issue is he strikes out a lot. He averages once every 4.5 at-bats a strikeout. That's a number he has to get down. Similar to Jose Siri, a lot of power, but he does strike out a lot. Now, his average and OBP numbers are better than Jose Siri, but obviously a much, much, much shorter sample size. And like Jose Siri, he does steal bases. In 2022, he stole 23. He only got thrown out 3 times, so 23 out of 26 is pretty damn good. So this is a low-risk, high-upside move from David Stearns, and I think somebody would claim him and probably want him. If the Mets were to put him on waivers and he doesn't make this opening day roster, he does have a lot of intrigue to him, and he could be an option. You're probably thinking to yourself, where does he fit, though? And I could understand that sentiment. But when you think about Tyrone Taylor, could Canario be an offensive upgrade? Remember, Jose Siri is great defensively. So is Tyrone Taylor, but Taylor doesn't hit a lot. Now, Taylor has a roster spot. You're paying him $3 million. He's probably going to be part of the opening day roster. He's part of the OMG Mets, the aura, great in the clubhouse. Now you start to think about what's next and what this could mean next. And that's when Starling Marte's name comes up right now for me. And Starling Marte is a guy that has been notified by the Mets that they were trying to trade him. And he appreciated that they were honest. And they said, you know what, I appreciate that. And they let me know. And you start to think, Can the Mets still deal Starling Marte? They tried all offseason. They couldn't shed that money, $20.75 million. To me, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, why would they get Canario, a guy with no options? And my thought is, hey, could he be a part-time DH and the replacement for Marte as a backup outfielder? Let's break down a potential of Miami Marte. And Starling Marte, a former Miami Marlin, a guy who enjoys the nightlife. We've seen it on his Instagram story. I'm sure would love being down in Miami and being in South Beach again. Here's why a lot of people don't really want Marte. $20.75 million, like I said. He's 36 years old. He's not really the same outfielder he used to be. He's the Mets' part-time DH backup outfielder. It's Winker and Marte right now are the Mets' DHs. And, he doesn't have a lot of intrigue to him, but he's still a Starling Marte. He's still a good player. Now, why mention the Miami Marlins and why the Mets maybe could get a last-minute Hail Mary deal done before the season is the Marlins' estimated luxury tax payroll is currently sitting just under $80 million. The Marlins now must have a payroll of at least $105 million to avoid a potential grievance from the Major League Baseball Players Association. There is a deal with revenue sharing and certain money being allocated to the team that is not being allocated to the Marlins roster right now, where there is a gap there. And if you do the math, that's around $25 million. Marte would cover almost 21 of that $25 million. Financially, if the Marlins wanted to do, hey, we'll get this guy and then we'll sign one other guy and boom, we're at the 105. He is the one massive move you can make where he's a one-year rental. They could potentially trade him at the deadline. And, Starling Marte makes a lot of sense going back to the Marlins, a place where he's had some success, and he could ease this problem that the Marlins have financially. I don't know. There's a potential trade I put out there. Marte for starting pitcher Ryan Weathers. Ryan Weathers' overall career numbers, not very good, but Ryan Weathers last year was a guy that the Mets could insert in the starting rotation and make him a starter for the time being while Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas are out. 16 starts last year for Ryan Weathers, 3.63 ERA. He is a lefty, so he could join David Peterson in the rotation as another lefty. And then he has spent time in his career as a reliever as well. So, listen, Ryan Weathers, you look at his numbers before 2024 and they're ugly. But he's coming off a year where he was a serviceable starter for a bad Marlins team. And now you give him an offense like the Mets have and make him a spot starter. Listen, it's a deal that could line up and make a lot of sense for the Mets. Starling Marte, send the money over there to the Marlins. They cover their potential grievance issue. Maybe they add one other player for $5 or $6 million. Boom, they're at 105. The Mets get rid of Marte. They shed that money. Canario's on the roster, and that allows the Mets to use the Marte money in order to get starting pitching help like a Quintana, although I think Quintana we're going to hear soon where he ends up. This deal makes a lot of sense for both sides, and I'd like to see it get done. And I feel Canario could be this lightning in a bottle piece for the Mets into this puzzle if he gets a chance to get a little bit more playing time. And I worry you get him, he goes elsewhere, and he could be a real player. Now, he could end up being a bust. He might not be that good. But to me, the 24-year-old lightning in a bottle kind of guy who hit a ton of homers in the minors and had relative success in little playing time in the majors has a lot more intrigue to me than a 36-year-old Starling Marte. I like Marte. I wouldn't mind him on the Mets, but I think the Mets are thinking in the back of their minds, hey, we're paying this guy $21 million to maybe play 80 games for us. We're paying him $1 million every 4 games. The numbers just don't add up to keep Starling Marte financially. So we'll see what ends up happening there. The numbers are starting to add up, and the roster's starting to add up for Luisangel Acuña to essentially be a lock to be on the opening day roster. I think, to me, I feel, assuming no injuries, I feel Luisangel Acuña is going to be on this roster. And obviously it's only spring training, but you see what he kind of does for this team as a kind of leadoff hitter at the bottom of that order, whether he would hit 8th or 9th. And you see he gets on, single, stolen base, a bad throw, gets to 3rd, scores on a single. That's another leadoff hitter at the bottom of the order. You have him and then Lindor. If you go, Acuna, then Lindor, then Soto, my God, there's a lot this Mets lineup can do. And it begs the question, and I think a lot of Mets fans are thinking of it, put the money to the side that Jeff McNeil's owed. Does Jeff McNeil or Luisangel Acuña do more for this lineup and this Mets team? And to me, my answer personally is Luis Angel Acuna does more for the Mets than Jeff McNeil. And I hope Jeff McNeil is back to the batting champion Jeff, and he's back and he's healthy. But the emotion, the inconsistency, the attitude, to me, doesn't play well, and he doesn't steal bases. Where Luis Angel Acuna steals bases, plays good defense, and when you lose Madrigal as your backup shortstop, Acuna is a guy who can play short, second, and third. He could play 3 infield positions, and if you needed him in a pinch, which you don't in the outfield, he could be a backup center fielder. So I like what Acuna brings to the table. I think he's going to start against left-hand pitching. And honestly, if he does well early on, I think he could get some starts over McNeil versus right-hand pitching as well. And Jeff McNeil potentially becomes that bench piece, backup corner outfielder, backup second baseman. Despite him making $15.75 million, I think Luis Angel Acuna could really earn his way to be as close to an everyday player as possible for the Mets. I just think he's a spark and a kind of a leadoff junior hitter at the bottom of that order. And I hope we can see a lot of Luis Angel Acuna. I'm not in the business of trading him for Dylan Cease. I'm not in the business of trading him for anyone right now. I want Acuna as a part of this 2025 Mets puzzle to try and win a championship. What do you think in the comments? Let me know below. Should Luis Angel Acuna start over Jeff McNeil? And should the Mets trade Starling Marte to the Miami Marlins to get some cap relief and go out and get a starting pitcher with that money that they would trade Starling Marte? Let me know in the comments. We're reading your top 3 comments. And tomorrow, Hump Day, New York Mets show on here on Mets Daily. And I'm your host, Jake Brown Radio. Follow me at Jake Brown Radio. Subscribe to my YouTube at Jake Brown Radio. Smash that thumbs up. Subscribe to Mets Daily. We'll be back on a Hump Day tomorrow. We got a guest Thursday. A busy week in Mets land here in February. We're talking Mets baseball all year long. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for watching Mets Daily.